Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Gross. On behalf of everyone at Congruent and our industry partners, welcome to this hopefully very interesting session, The Future of the Retirement Plan Industry, Answers to Business Challenges Lie in the Cloud. This is an expert panel discussion for the next 45 minutes, plus your questions, which you are invited to address via the chat window or the question window, or if you'd like, you're welcome to say them to the end as well. Joining us today, Ronak Doshi, partner at Everest Group, James, we call him Jamie McInnes, President and CEO of Oculus Partners, Lucas Susi, Senior Vice President of Congruent Solutions, and moderating today's discussion, Michael Kiernan, Head of Sales for Congruent as well. Thank you for joining us. If you have colleagues who are not able to join but would like to see this, rest assured that upon conclusion, we'll be putting this into post-production for an on-demand replay to be available to you in a couple of days. When you registered for this conversation, we asked if you would give us your thoughts on two questions. We'd like to invite you to remind you what we asked you to the first one right here, and that is, which of these is most important to accomplish in the next 12 to 24 months? Michael, I'm gonna hand the mic over to you to pick it up from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out to join us here and answering these questions upon registration. It's always helpful to kind of get this feedback from people and get this information. So, yeah, I mean, with this first question here, which of these is most important to accomplish to you in the next 12 to 24 months? I think this pie chart tells me a couple of things. First and foremost, that a major concern here amongst the group attending is improving client experience. But secondly, and probably more importantly, is that there's multiple concerns. Everybody's kind of got several things up in the air here that they're dealing with. And so I know it's probably hard to pick a priority and say what's the most important. But, with that, I would say probably feed over to Lucas to start. Kind of looking at that and based on your experience, what do you think are some of the changes happening in the retirement industry?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Happy to kick it off. I guess I'd start off and say I think it's a bit broader. I think some of the challenges and changes that we're seeing today, it's a bit more than just the retirement industry. I think it goes across multiple industries, banking, healthcare, finance, and definitely, of course, retirement. We live in a culture today based on instant gratification. People expect immediate access to their information, accounts, and any delay or, God forbid, any downtime for any duration is unacceptable. The spinning wheel of death, if you will, that just keeps you hanging on the screen won't inspire confidence in your organization. And long gone are the days, I guess, of logging into your AOL online account through a dial-up modem, right, and brewing a pot of coffee in between while you're waiting to connect. We're also seeing changes not just as it relates to speed and availability. We're seeing expectations change in how people should access their data and accounts. The ability to be able to do so across multiple devices from different locations, expectations on how workflows should be designed for easy navigation. All of these personalized to the individual as opposed to designed generically for a more broad audience. The saying goes, what was acceptable yesterday is not acceptable today and certainly won't be acceptable tomorrow. And this is thanks in large part to organizations like Facebook and Amazon and Google, who've all dramatically changed our expectations of how you service and deliver your clients. And I think in this industry, I don't think we've quite caught up to that, although we are making strides. One of the things in the pie chart, obviously, to stay competitive, providers are looking to be able to add newer products and services, things like advisor managed accounts, a trend towards in-plan guaranteed retirement income. In a race, I guess, to add things like this quickly and beat competition, sometimes it feels like, and I'll quote Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights, if you're not first, you're last. So people are trying to get these products out here and have them be branded to their name. So they have to react quickly to do so. And lastly, as it relates specific to the retirement industry, it just feels like recently there's been a higher frequency of regulatory and legislative changes lately. I mean, I don't know if they actually have been, but it definitely feels that way. So you take a look at, and we've just gone through two significant spends in technology to address the Secure Act and the CARES Act. And they're still both, undergoing some changes, even today about how they're being interpreted, and we're getting things coming in we have to make adjustments for. And we're poised to take on more now with the Build Back Better Act, which aside, I'm going to take a little pause there because I'm actually impressed that I said Build Back Better correctly. So as a Boston guy, I don't think they took into account us up here in the Northeast when they came up with that name. So I'll just call it Triple B or something like that going forward. But in any case, there's going to be a lot of things in this coming down the pipe too. For things and modifications as relates to auto IRAs, mandated plan coverage, grandfather provisions, and rules surrounding enrollment and escalation, limits on large plan balances, and guaranteed income for life options for large accounts. Just to name a few. Right? This is a lot. So I think we're all happy and excited to expand coverage and to offer better services to our clients. But to prepare for this and address these things, really, it's a large effort. And these are some of the changes, but some of the challenges around it. And these things add up to real dollars too.
No, well, I can appreciate that, and a couple of things that you said stood out to me. One, I've always it's so cliche, but it's been around forever and has rung true for the whole time. Is that the only constant in this industry is change, right? Things are always evolving and changing. And the other is the on-demand aspect of kind of life these days. As the father of three young kids, I can tell you, just I think having to rewind an audio tape versus just kind of skip to whatever you want on the radio and play anything you want through Apple Music or whatever. It's definitely an on-demand generation and world that we live in. But with all that said, I think Jamie kind of got a little off on tangent there, but kind of bringing it back. From your perspective, those are kind of regulatory, I guess you could say, dynamics. With your experience and what you do, what would you say, are kind of some larger organizational, perhaps, dynamics that play into this?
Well, I think what Lucas went back to in terms of the expectations of the customer having evolved very, very quickly. I don't think it's a coincidence that has happened at the same time that several providers have decided to get out of the business and others have decided to take on partnerships as a means to address both costs as well as experience upgrades. And I think everybody else is thinking about, why are we in this business? So I think one of the challenges that a lot of the players have out there today, and when you saw, say, 3 major players exit, when you saw 2 major players partner up, that seemed like a pretty fast and pretty concentrated component. I think is completely aligned with this changing customer expectations and a lack of understanding of how to make the investment that they need to make to get to the cloud, to get to the point where they can actually be competitive and be iterative around client experience. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of this is, how do we pay for this? Why are we in this business? And I think those questions arise every year in each of these businesses. Some with exceptions, but I think the biggest issue is, how do we figure out how to stay competitive? And that's why I think that client experience thing was as large in the response, because I think everybody's recognizing you can't advance that client experience meaningfully, you can't stay competitive. And I think that's where I think the biggest trend is right now, is like trying to figure out, how are you going to fund not just the regulatory changes, but how are you going to fund what is needed to stay competitive in the marketplace? And I see that when we talk to clients and they're struggling with X, Y, and Z, they are focused on, how do I make this work financially for my firm? And not everybody has an answer that goes, we know exactly where we're going. Some are saying we're getting out. And that's part of the trend.
Veronica, I see you agreeing pretty much wholeheartedly with that. So I guess I'll turn to you and give you a chance here. What do you think is kind of creating an urgency, for folks with these issues?
No, absolutely. And again, I think Jamie kind of brought us to first principles, right? Why are we in this business? How are we creating value? How do we serve our customers? Just to kind of take a step back, also, if you look at this market, right, US retirements market, it's the world's largest. It has more than $35 trillion in asset under management. And it's a growing market, right? It was growing over the last 5 years at around 8 to 9%. But if you look at the flip side of this industry, which is so large, growing really well, healthy, what's happening under the hood, right? If you look at the top 15 USDC record keepers, almost 87% of them would have high degree of mainframe-based technology. And we're witnessing an acute shortage of talent to kind of manage these legacy systems, right, with mainframe-based skills. But at the same time, if you look at from an employee value proposition of attracting the new generation of workforce that is coming into it, that the on-demand generation which is coming to work, they are wanting to work on more digital cloud-ready technologies. And that is where, when we talk about this experience being a key imperative for the industry, this legacy environment is actually causing a lot of data and operational silos. It's creating this friction, which is hurting the industry's ability to kind of drive these personalization experience, right? Drive these data-driven decision-making efforts, right? It's across front office, middle, back office that we are seeing it. And that's what we are seeing is you are looking at front office modernization, and definitely, right, the two themes that we discussed in that pie chart, one of them was driving experience innovation, and the second was product innovation. And the third, to enable it, is the operational innovation. You need the right data and the systems and applications to make this happen, right? So I think all three kind of, from my perspective, kind of fall together into how the industry is going to behave overall. And I think that's going to be important, because as you look at creating this experience for both the plan participants and plan sponsors, you need to have systems which are responsive, contextual, and they're kind of, creating this experience. And at the same time, I think message that Jamie, you kind of brought about, I think I really like this, right? Because as you talk about the first principles of this business, at one end, you look at the business fundamentals, you're seeing strong decline in fees, right, in this market, right? Almost over the last 6 years, again, almost 9.9% decline. You're trying to, manage this loss of revenue by kind of creating value-added services, diversifying the revenue, and ensuring you have more sale and scale. You can't have that if you don't have the right experience, and you need the right systems to be kind of managing it. And that's where a lot of this, conversation, which, I thought, we could kind of pivot towards, is how do you modernize these systems, right? Again, that's one of the things around cloud that we want to talk about. So I'll leave that thought to you, and then come more to it later.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think all of that kind of brings us back to I think the second question that we had, because I hear everybody kind of talking about just how competitive the market's becoming, and the need to innovate, right? But at the same time, kind of I guess compression of fees and revenues and things. So. With the second question, we kind of asked, based on need and where you feel the priorities are, where are you, or where is your company in regard to its investment in technology and modernization? And I mean, resoundingly, while everybody is naturally in different stages, right? Resoundingly, the response is you're at least at some point, right, in this process of investing, whether you're evaluating. Kind of starting to or really aggressively going at it. It seems like everybody is there. And so with that, Ronak, where you ended, kind of looking at this, we know kind of where people's priorities are. And for the most part, the vast majority of people here on the phone with us and in the industry are investing. One of the ways to kind of balance this, I guess you could say, is, as you put it, kind of shifting to the cloud, right? And being able to help there. So with that, I'll go back to you, Lucas. Kind of looking at that, where do you see, or what do you see as some of the benefits of moving to the cloud?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I guess broadly speaking, there's quite a few, otherwise we wouldn't be here today, right? So, I'll touch it, just right at the highest level, improve operating costs and margins, improve speed to market, of new ideas and products, scalability, resiliency, more flexibility overall. All the buzzwords that you hear probably at cocktail parties and things like that. If your life is as boring as mine, and those are the kind of cocktail parties you happen to attend. But I mean, what does that really mean? I guess, right? So if we drill into what that means to us as an industry, how are these applicable, right? So just a couple examples, I guess I'll go into, but take the concept of containers, right? So containers, very similar to what you might think about for like a shipping container in a way. They act as independent operating systems. They contain all the logic and data required to be able to run a service or function. They're portable, lightweight, can operate across multiple operating systems. Sorry, I feel like I'm losing your mic. You got that, right? So in English, maybe a little bit, okay. I'll take it down a little level, I guess. But just take like payroll processing as an example. Let's say you're hit with 10,000 large files or something like that. So the cloud app can essentially spin up as many of these containers, right, as required, and to process the data all in parallel. The cloud native app that you have, it takes care of all of this on its own. It handles load balancing, tracking CPU, memory, all that. And it's all done on the fly. So you scale up and scale down as required. Along the lines of that too, this DB mirroring, it allows, for redundancy and failover. We can do things like hot copies to keep nearly, uninterrupted service and uptime. In both of these things too, it should be noted that both of these can be done outside of a cloud environment too, right? Of course, it's nothing new to the industry. But having it be able to happen on demand and to be able to scale up as required, and only have to pay, right? This comes into the total cost of operating, only having to pay to maintain the servers or pay for the service of the servers, right? That you need when you need them, and you don't have to pay for them when you don't, as opposed to a traditional environment where you have to have these servers, you have to maintain them, and you have to have enough in place to be able to handle the spikes, to be able to utilize some of these services. Another kind of benefit, I think, about cloud computing, it supports the notion of democratization of innovation. It's a concept that's coined by an MIT professor, Eric von Hippel. It's a theory where people create on their own and develop needs specific to them rather than count on a large manufacturer or corporation to create something more broad. And this isn't just in software, this concept. I mean, it is across manufacturing too. But the benefit here is added to all of this, all these innovations that people are creating, they're all shared. So you don't have to do it all on your own, right? But you can benefit from what others have already done and to advance your own needs. So in cloud computing, there are literally thousands of open source libraries that you can tap into. Things like ready-made, artificial intelligence and machine learning bots, DB management services, analytics, reporting tools, you name it, right? So then rather having to rely on developing all of these on your own, you can utilize pieces of them in your offering. From having bots to help with, say, data validations on payroll submissions, to anticipating end user needs and requirements based on demographics, preferences and prior activities to help deliver like a more personalized message to the individual logging in. And by the way, this experience, right, it can all be done regardless of the device they log into or where they log into it, because the essence of the service experience itself, no longer resides on the device itself. So it's in the cloud. So it can be accessed across different devices in different locations. Given everything I think we went through with COVID, I think it's pretty relevant, right? I mean, a lot of these tie into, I guess, the first pie chart we talked about, right? So the ability to be able to go to market, first question we asked, to be able to go to market faster with products. And while that might have been a small piece of the pie, it's certainly important for others. Operational efficiencies, the ability to be able to develop and go to market faster with some of your ideas, not just market with ideas, but to be able to create efficiencies within your system, utilizing some of these cloud native applications that are already out there. You don't have to redesign the wheel, and be able to deploy those in your own environment and take advantage of those to be able to create some of the efficiencies required. And all at a total cost of operating that's lower than a traditional mainframe system, because you're not maintaining the servers, you're not paying for them, and you're only using what you need when you need it. So I'll stop there, I promise. So, I can probably nerd out for a little bit longer on that, but that's all right.
Yeah, no. So I mean, with that, I guess I'll go to you, Jamie, because it sounds, Lucas talking about all of these benefits, kind of, the flexibility and savings and all of these things associated with the cloud. From your perspective, I guess what would stop people, right, from doing that? What slows the pace of modernization, I guess you could say?
Well, a couple of things, right? A lot of these retirement businesses sit in the middle of larger enterprises, right? And so sometimes the progression towards modernization is somewhat tied to how fast the larger organization is modernizing as well. So that's one part of it. And I think another part in these larger enterprises, they're all trying to figure out where to spend their next best dollar. And it's not always a retirement business, right? So that's an element of the challenges I think a lot of firms have. A lot of the DC competitors have is that dynamic in and of itself. Third thing that I think is challenging is there's a lot of embedded interests, right? In terms of the legacy platforms, and there's a lot of affinity towards maintaining the processes and maintaining the technology, because there's a lot of pride in what's been built over the last 20 years. So there's a sort of a from the bottom, there's sometimes a resistance to this because frankly, they're very proud and they should be of what they have done over time. And this looks very different. A third would be that I think that as I talk to management teams, senior managers in these businesses tend not to have been paid to get very comfortable with the technology. That used to always be in the background. Let me prioritize the list of initiatives and we're good and I'm going to trust you're going to get that done. And an education around what moving to the cloud can actually do to enable this business is sometimes hard to articulate within that group that is actually making the decisions or is going to have to argue for or advocate for in their enterprise for this investment in their business overall. And then the fourth and final thing that I would say is that for those who actually have come to a determination that this is something that needs to be taken on, and even if they've got money or stacked against this, it's about how to do it. And so teams internally, they've never been challenged with how do I transform? It's not just that this is not a technology issue alone. This is operational. This is how I engage my customers. All these things change as a result of putting these things in place. So change management and transformation management is one of the major things that I think that stands in the way. And I would say that frankly, a lot of the senior managers out there, they have not been trained on transformation management, right? This can be daunting to a lot of folks as they think about it in terms of conversations they need to have with their employees. How do they communicate to their clients and their customers about what's coming? How do they sequence it? So there's a lot of risk in taking on transformation, and that sometimes gets in the way. So I would put those four things out there as being sort of fairly big inhibitors to firms moving forward. We've seen a few get past it. I think others may as well, but it has been, it's this economic pressure that we've seen in terms of fees and the increased expectations of customer expectations that is forcing companies to deal much, much more seriously with this particular question.
So, Vernon, I guess taking what Jamie just said and kind of looking at it from the perspective of the vast majority of people know they need to make a change, right? But then with the multiple people involved, looking at it from different angles and kind of deciding to, I guess, using some of Jamie's examples, deciding it's either too risky, they're too attached to what's already been built. It's simply not a priority because of another area or, all of those things. How would you make, I guess, the business case for making that change to kind of overcome those objections, I guess you could say?
Yeah, no, I think, and the good part is I can kind of, build upon what Lucas mentioned and then kind of use what Jamie said to kind of bring the two together to talk about the business case. Because if you look at from my vantage point, as I look at cloud, all the benefits that Lucas mentioned, I would group them into two buckets. There is cloud for efficiency and there's cloud for growth. Cloud for efficiency is all about how do I drive cost efficiencies for managing the entire cost of operations of business. So it's not just technology, but the entire cost of operations. And how do I create that efficiencies at scale? And then you're basically getting all the benefits of scalability, resiliency that you kind of talked about. So that's one piece of the business case that you create. The second piece of business case is the cloud for growth, which is where I think a lot of the points Jamie made, right? How do you drive business alignment? How do you understand the customer needs better? How do you design products faster and you basically have time to market? How do you democratize a lot of innovation? How do you work with ecosystem partners to design these processes and work together? Because you are not the only entity impacting the entire retirement experience for an individual. There are several entities in that value chain. Think of that experience end to end. And you can't do this alone if you are in your siloed system. You need to be on a cloud system where you're able to kind of bring all of these components together to kind of impact that experience. And that's, for us, is the business case for it. hey, you can't do this alone. You need partners to do this. And hey, you don't have to think just about the technology cost of it. You need to think of the total operations or the running the business of it. From a record keeping perspective, it's all about how do you reduce the the per participant per month cost of operations, right? Let's talk about that TCO model and then kind of think through that change. I believe that is what is driving this business case at the start of it, and then the ability to do innovation, product experience, product innovation, channel innovation, partner innovation. All of this is where it helps you to kind of drive that next business case. So save and then fund the change, both kind of driving this business case.
Excellent. Yeah. So I guess that kind of brings to mind, I guess, having made the business case then, and I think this time I'll go to Jamie to start. As you're making that business case and kind of getting further down to making steps towards, I guess, enacting change, if you will, or implementing, what do you think are kind of the keys to success or the key factors to successfully approaching modernization in the business?
Well, the leadership team's ability to manage change is definitely going to be, as I mentioned, part of it. But I think there's some fairly practical things that need to be done. First, the leadership team needs to be incredibly aligned. Whether it's the P&L owner, the technology lead, your sales lead, they all have to be aligned that this needs to happen, and they have to accept the fact from an alignment point of view of what that means for change. It can't just be, oh, if you're going to change, that's fine, and we're going to get there. Everybody needs to change when this happens. And so alignment is critical. And I think getting that internal alignment is not easy. It's challenging because everybody's got their own goals that they're trying to pursue. Sales, I've got to cut this amount of cost this year. And these are multi-year type endeavors. And so the second thing that I think is important for companies to think about, because again, as I said, these leaders have never been, paid to spend a lot of time trying to figure out this technology stuff, is to start to become educated and actually get outside partners to come in with that expertise that have done this before, that are able to bring, real life examples of how this actually would work. Seeking that outside help has been very important. And you've seen a couple of firms recently do exactly that. And they've decided they needed to move forward, they needed to modernize, but they did not try to do it on their own. They brought in a key partner to do that. So if somebody's thinking about this, I encourage clients to talk to outside partners specifically to try and gain insights into how to do it. And then, the last thing I would say, and I said there were two, but one more. A lot of things are big bang. People they want to do things all at once, but it's going to take 4 or 7 years for the entire journey to happen. You got to figure out how to actually get incremental benefit and change. So while you're, changing the back end, you've got to be delivering some upfront capabilities for your clients to appreciate. You have customer experiences, upticks, et cetera. And for whatever it is that drives your economics as to why you're in that business, you have to have some economic benefit, not just that the clients like you better and it's easier to use. You've also got to feed some of that economic benefit that you're getting out of this business as well. So it's got to be planned for incremental benefits to accrue during the early portions of this. It helps to gain buy-in. It helps to gain adoption of successful sort of behaviors in terms of moving it forward when you recognize those things happening. And that tends to be a more successful way of actually moving a firm forward, is that incremental approach, but a very planned and very deliberate one, feeding, those 2 or 3 main things that need to be fed along the way for success to be recognized.
I agree with Jamie. I think we keep talking about this almost as if, there's only one strategy to go about this, right? It really depends what you want to do and what your business needs are, right? So if you're solely looking maybe for a reduction in TCO, right, and nothing else, then maybe rehosting works just fine, right? And you can lift your existing application, place it on the cloud. There you go, you're on the cloud, right? There it is, right? That's done. Yay. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that, really. I mean, honestly, there can be some significant savings realized up front for that. But you don't gain a lot of the other advantages of modernization, things that we talked about earlier about, the cloud native applications and things like that.
Right.
democratization of innovation. So then you say, okay, well, maybe what we'll do is, maybe instead of that, we'll re-architect, right? And we'll re-architect our product, and we'll put that on the cloud, and we'll design it specifically for the cloud. And even that, as you pointed out, Jim, right, it doesn't have to be a big bang approach to it, right? You can start doing incremental approaches like replatforming, where you start to re-architect and migrate pieces over that make sense. That gets you the best bang for the buck, initially, or give the best user experience or user interface up front, right? So you don't have to wait for it all to come through on that. And I know, Ronak, I know that you have some data points and things like that as well too, about some of the savings and different strategies and things like that, where people might be able to realize gains and what they might do with them, right? But yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. But we don't have to think about it just as only one approach. Depending on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to gain out of it, there could be different ways to do it.
Yeah, and I think what Jamie mentioned is very important. I wanted to stress upon that as well, right? Because what we are saying is the business and technology alignment. What I would advise a lot of our clients has been, let's build what we will call as the future state of retirements. What kind of experience, what kind of user journeys, right? What kind of operations you're designing for. If you have the North Star, you will start making these incremental modernization steps to reach there. What we are seeing is this disjointed steps where somebody is doing some process transformation activities, infusing automation, somebody is trying to drive something on the other hand on data, and both are not talking to each other. And then you're trying to do these inefficient ways of modernization. So one thing we are saying is, think of this as this journey of transformation of that full stack. And again, going back to the point of what that TCO looks like, right? You will, and again, our research, if you look at it, we're showing just from an operations cost, right? The people and the technology that you're putting in for managing that, you can reduce that by 60-65% because there is inefficiencies which exist in the system. There are simplification modules that you can bring in, but what you'll need to do is break these legacy systems into microservices, configurable based components, assemble them together one step at a time towards building that end state. The good part is you don't have to do this all alone. I think that's what Mike, you mentioned, Jamie mentioned, right? You don't have to do this alone because there are these configurable components being built by others, API-based integrations built by others. You need to work with the ecosystem because there is innovation which is there. Cloud enables that democratization of innovation, as you said. How do we bring that together and support that in that journey of modernization is going to be very, very critical. And having that thought through as a strategic element and then going towards that is what we would suggest is like the most ideal approach that we'll see to kind of succeed.
So it sounds like everybody, each of you kind of touched on the length of time, right, it takes to implement and kind of the sequence and process. So I think with that, Ronak, I guess I would ask you, what areas are you seeing as being kind of having faster or migration to the cloud, I guess you could say?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, it kind of feeds into the discussion here, right? We've seen this, I would say this journey to cloud would very well depend on the current architectural complexity, the data integration complexity, and the operational complexity that each organization has. So the answer we would say is very unique to each organization. But I would say the sequencing of the migration of these applications, what you do with each of the application in terms of re-architecting or rewriting or just rehosting, that depends on what was the history and where you're trying to get to. We have traditionally seen a lot of the first steps being taken, the baby steps is around a lot of the surround services. Okay, we are doing collaboration between people. Let's move that to cloud, right? That's easy because it doesn't impact our core. There are HR systems and some of these things which don't impact us from our client experience perspective, but an internal stakeholder employee experience. You start with those, you experiment, you get that right, and then you start doing the other things is what we've seen primarily happen with a lot of our clients. And then what happens is as you start thinking about that at scale, you are now thinking, okay, where can I impact our business more? And we've seen typically a lot of the compliance, reporting, accounting, document management tools, which are still not impacting customer, but are impacting a lot of the middle office, back office functions are thought of, okay, let's move those to cloud. The other area where we are seeing parallelly that cloud migration or cloud tools will be starting to adopt is a lot of these marketing, sales enablement, customer experience, front-end engines being built out there. And that is where this element of, you need to kind of sequence it really well, right? Because you don't want to have a very fast front end that is responsive to the customer need, but the data that you need to kind of support that and the back end operations that you need to support that is not working at the same speed, right? That's the current industry challenge that we are seeing. So how do you solve for that is you start touching the core. How do you break these components of core into these microservices based systems is going to be important. We've still seen the intent is more around, okay, let's think about the payroll integration or lending system integration, which are easier available from third party to be kind of brought in first. And then you start touching the core. It's been the typical sequencing that we've seen. But what I would say is all of this will eventually, right, as I said in the beginning, would depend on how you're thinking of the complexity of the systems that are there and what that target state you're trying to design. But that's been the typical order we are seeing of migration of applications to cloud.
And I think we're seeing that as well too, Ronak, but I mean, I think you're looking at it more holistically, right, of an entire ecosystem and environment. We're seeing that the transactional based type processing is something that people are exploring, right, trying to to utilize it to give a better user experience. Utilize some of the ready-made things that are already out there to be able to deliver better service to the clients while saving on the background too, right, of what it costs to be able to deliver that. And then really, just kind of surrounding, I guess, the legacy systems and relegating them to the mode of being really an accounting software, if you will, right? I mean, they do that very well. So, no reason to kind of touch that right away and disturb that, but really just utilize things to offer some of these ancillary services around the platform. That's what we're seeing for sure as well.
So, Jamie, I'll let you weigh in on this. What have you seen in terms of approaches that have worked or perhaps even haven't really worked, I guess?
Well, as I'm reflecting on what Ronak had to say in terms of what he's seen out there and trying to contrast that with firms that have done much bolder and wholesale sort of moves. I think if I was reflecting on what Ronak had to say is that you have components of the organization that say, yeah, we got to do something different. So let's tackle this. And then that gets tackled. And then the next thing gets tackled and then the next thing. But that sort of model sort of betrays the fact that there's not internal alignment that wholesale change is necessarily required. So you could still figure out how to do things more incrementally. But as Ronak's what he's describing is that we're going to tackle the things that don't really impact the client experience first, that are, that maybe give us some cost savings, as Lucas was saying. But it lacks a strategic perspective on where that end state is. That Ronak said, you need to know where you're going to be in 5 years. So what I don't think works well is, well, there are benefits. So let's not identify that as being a problem in terms of incremental changes that provide benefits to businesses. Businesses do that all the time. But given the competitive nature of this industry itself, all right, where fees are going, having that wholesale view as to where you want to be in 5 years and a plan to it is probably the thing that needs to be done for successful organizations to get down that path. And that does mean, again, that you are going to put a roadmap in place that probably won't be the same roadmap that Ronak described that people are doing incrementally. It'll probably be more holistic in nature. And it will impact client experience in some of the earlier iterations, as well as some of the back end, and you're preparing the back end. And so I think the approach, and Ronak, again, said it right. Have your 5-year view on where you need to be. It's much more important to have that. And then whatever incremental steps you are taking, you understand how it fits in a multi-year picture. So that would be the recommendation I would have is that firms are going to spend time thinking about moving to the cloud. Don't do things just in onesie, twosie type ways. Have a perspective of where you need to be in 5 years. You may still do things incrementally, but it'll be done within the context of a broader plan.
I agree. And definitely the broader plan is important to have. You have to have it. If you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there, right? Right. So, but taking the incremental approach, are you seeing, Jerry, that like organizations are able to use some of their early decisions to be able to help fund or create capacity right along the way, right? So if you're going through and you're making some of these changes and maybe you hit some of your big bang ones that have a bigger impact, does that then help fund, not help fund, it's not like you can pull dollars out of nowhere, but right, but this kind of concept, it's building on itself and makes it easier progressively as you go along, right?
And the roadmap should have early wins with demonstration of benefit to the firm, to the clients that are communicated and are managed as examples, but they are still done within the context of a broader vision. But your roadmap needs to be designed to have those elements up front, Lucas, as you're describing, because otherwise people are waiting way too long for any benefits to materialize. And at that stage, staying committed to those types of spends is very difficult.
And just to also think about this is these quick wins are helping you gain capabilities in the organization to do these kind of change in terms of the technology skills, the IT skills, operation skills that you need, and the change management in general. So I think doing this in incremental steps, but with that vision, as Jamie said, will allow you to build those capabilities, because in this current market scenario, the talent issues are way more higher. So you will have to kind of plan accordingly to that as well. And I think doing that earlier in your journey, and I think that's going to be a big competitive advantage for a lot of retirement firms. The ones who have not started are now starting to see an employee value proposition, as I said, right, not aligned to what the market wants. You're going to lose people. So that's going to be an internal issue, which is not just even client experience, but your employee experience, which is going to go down. So how do you solve for that? It kind of creates this urgency for this discussion even more.
So I guess that brings one I guess final question, looking at the time that comes to mind. And Jamie, thinking of some of the things that you mentioned out and everybody kind of expanded on, in the sense of, kind of going through from the beginning to end here, that we've identified some problems, right, that people are working on, and some things that need to be addressed, and the best approach or best practice to solving those, kind of taking a step back and looking at big picture, and most importantly, bringing in outside resources, right, for their knowledge and their experience. How well equipped or how well educated do you think, or in your experience, are business leaders when it comes to that, to kind of looking at multiple problems and bringing in help or support to put it together?
Well, I think leadership teams have been designed to solve certain problems really well, and they are trained to solve those problems. It's a sales problem. We have a product issue. We have a client retention issue, and they solve those problems really well. We need to get out to see the client. We need to talk to the intermediary firm differently than we have before, and they solve those problems. But these problems aren't problems that they've been asked to solve for historically. So again, no fault of their own in that regard. What they've been paid to solve have been big, difficult problems, but not in this line. So I encourage people, as we talk to clients, to really think about how much time are you allocating to understanding sort of what these new problems are. You have a certain amount of hours you can spend in any day, and they spend well more than 8 hours in a day working. You've got to actually budget some time to dedicate to this particular activity. And you need to do it collectively as a leadership team. That collective learning and understanding to become equipped to solve these questions is really important. But it's an investment, just like everyone made an investment to figure out what accounting and finance was, and that was great. And we're sales, expertise. This is a different set of skills, and it's definitely something that a lot of leadership teams have not been asked to take on previously, and budgeting time to learn about it and dedicate your time to becoming more expert at actually addressing these particular problems, I think, is something that is worthwhile. It's an investment in you as a leader and your leadership team as a whole.
Darren, there's one line that you said before that I absolutely love, is that our industry is built on the backs of heroes, right? Of people that have stepped in to be able to make something work, right? You sold this product or something like that, and they've gone in and they've invested hours and time, and they've made it work for you as an industry or as an organization, and they just made it happen because they had to. And I think that's a great analogy too, but it's something it's built, but it's not necessarily scalable, right? So time is spent, energy is spent, and things like that. To go down this route, it has to be something. It's got to be strategic in nature. It can't be just kind of a single point. I want to address this one time, the one thing, this one solve. Right? It's got to be more strategic across an entire organization of where do you want to align yourself, as we've said a couple of times in this call, in 5-7 years. And something you've got to put yourself in a position to be able to deliver consistent product and services out there regularly, time after time, and not just hit these one-hit wonders kind of throughout the way. So, and to do that. And again, look, I'm stealing another quote from you there. Sorry, Jamie, I know, but I know you've said that, a lot of times, that these organizations, they just might not have the people resources in place today that need them. And you have to get help or educate yourself to be able to do that. Because, we've all backed ourselves with knowledge and years in servicing these plans, and something new is along. So we need to either educate or find a partner to be able to do so, right, to help us with that decision. So. I know I made that seem like it was my own thought. That's just what I do, right? So that's good.
Well, I definitely appreciate all that. So I know, so we're coming up, I guess, with 10 minutes left, and I know we wanted to reserve some time for questions, but also perhaps be able to kind of offer some closing thoughts from each of you, perhaps before we get to that, or.
Let's address a question we do have in the Q&A from the group. And by the way, if you have a question that you've been thinking about and haven't jotted it down, now's a perfectly good time to send it through the Q&A window. One that's pending is a very good one to ask you. Is there a cybersecurity advantage or disadvantage to cloud-based approaches? Example, what if an open source widget has a backdoor, kind of an idea?
Yeah, so I guess security is probably no surprise that comes up as a question. Right. So, I don't know. I look at things. You can get into specifics, I guess, about. We use Microsoft Azure a lot. So, looking at them, the amount of money and investments they put in place, the projects they're working on, from the Pegasus project, which is a microcontroller project to be able to separate the pre-boot, boot, and runtime. Integrations and things like that, and services that are happening between those, and a number of other different ones. But even to get it, without getting into specifics, if you just take one step back, is if you look at any organization, how much do you spend on security today? How much time and effort, dollars do you put in security? Well, Microsoft, as an example, spent over $1 billion on security. Now, granted, that's holistically over all their services and products, but in the cybersecurity space specifically, they have well over 3,500 people. Whose job is day in and day out, 24/7 by 365, right? They have a team of over 200 people that do, red on blue exercises to be able to detect vulnerabilities, to be able to go through and be able to look and try and penetrate and get into the systems to review these widgets and these bots and these things that are out there, and then to be able to make recommendations and adjustments to be able to counter those. So it's a significant arsenal that you have at your disposal to be able to count on and to be able to back it. It doesn't absolve you of your own to be able to to address security concerns within your own organization, but to have that backing, that bandwidth. And I'm sorry, I'll just take a little aside because I think it's kind of funny. But my neighbor across the street, he works at a service provider, and he deals with bandwidth and security a lot, and providing bandwidth. And I wonder if anybody on the panel knows what one of the the top 5 times when they get hit for scalability is actually when new sneakers go on sale. Okay, so when new sneakers go on sale, everybody goes out, they've got bots, and they try and buy them within seconds to resell them on the secondary market. It's insane. I would have never thought this in a million years. But yeah, so he has a whole team dedicated to just watching on that day and letting bots and letting AI bots into certain rooms to allow them to operate independently and securely, just to study how they behave in an environment. And then they go out and they tackle those as opposed to taking them down directly. So this is the kind of people, this is the kind of scrutiny and security you're getting when dealing with some of the larger providers out there like an Azure or an Amazon AWS or something like that. Sorry, I dominated that question on that there as opposed to letting anyone else speak. And I know there's not a lot of time, but Ronak, Jamie, I'll let you as you like. So
that question, I go to Ronak to ask him what he's seeing on the security side. This is where I would call in the specialist to answer that question personally. But Ronak, I'm not sure if you've looked at that in the work that your group does.
No, absolutely. So I think as we approach the cybersecurity question, we are approaching this from, I would say, 3 different ways. One is the data. Second is what you would call as from an applications. And the third is from an entire network and, infrastructure. And again, what Lucas said, right? The infrastructure and the network that you're kind of consuming from public cloud providers, the sophistication of security controls and processes that they've set up, and also the amount of tools and ecosystem partners who are building more security technology on top of these cloud providers. That area is kind of growing massively. So they're kind of supporting this space. I think what becomes important from a retirement firm's perspective is how are you designing your data systems and your application systems to manage security. So there are infrastructure which is providing you all the best security benefits, and you need to take advantage of it. Definitely that's there. So that will protect you, but you also need to design your applications and data systems to ensure that. So you'll have to give a lot of trust to your consumers, your plan sponsors, participants around how are you handling their data, how secured it is, because it's the human and digital trust element that you need to bring together. So it's how do you kind of design those systems, which is very critical, and you will need that expertise to kind of do that. And it's not just about how do you store the data, right? It's also about how do you protect data while it is moving, right, from one system to the other in transactions, and then data which is while processing, right? So how do you compute in a much more confidential manner? And there are a lot of these different areas from a confidential computing perspective, which are technology which is available. And then applications, right? So best practices in IT architecture, application design, code design are things which are improving a lot. And what we have seen is the first movers advantage or the first movers who moved to cloud, they've brought in a lot of learning in terms of how do you design applications for the cloud. So we can pick best practices from there to also manage some of these security concerns. But I agree with the question. And I think it's one of the key things that you need to keep in mind as you're building the North Star or what does the future of retirement industry look like. One of the elements of this is going to be how do we make it secure and informed. So definitely that's important.
Well, I think we are caught up, and I would invite final comments from the group and appreciate everyone who's joined us today.
I'll start with Jamie, I guess. Anything you want to add as a kind of final thought, closing remark?
I think it's quite timely a topic because I think pretty much everybody is thinking about these things. Some are, more advanced stages than others. If you're going to stay in this business, you've got to take this on, and you've got to actually have a plan. And I think the time where people have been able to dabble to do incremental stuff without a larger holistic plan is somewhat past. And I think if you're going to be in this business, this is something that's going to have to be sort of a main topic. And it has to have a roadmap that you signed up for, and you have got to align the organization meaningfully around execution on that roadmap. That has to be happening today.
Lucas, I'll go to you.
I mean, it's hard to argue with that, but I think you said you got to have a starting point, you got to have an end point, and it isn't always a straight line that gets you there sometimes. But you have to have it mapped out of what you're thinking about. And how you want to get there. But that can't just be done if you don't have the knowledge and education internally on what you're trying to do. And you've got to seek help from somebody outside and bring those individuals in, educate people on your team, so you can make those educated decisions. So you know where you want to go and how you get there. And to the point of not just doing the onesies, twosies, or where's your starting point, so you get the most bang for your buck originally, to be able to kind of help fund and get those early wins on. Those decisions can't be taken lightly, and you should do so making sure that either you know what you're doing about it, or you find somebody to help you that does.
Veronica, we'll close it out with you.
It's going to be interesting, right? Because we spoke about what is the need and why there is an urgency to drive this need, and again we talked about how and what are the roadblocks and challenges on the way. I would say, and again, all of this is great, but what I've seen in my experience is it's the one size fit approach does not work out here, right? So for your organization, you would need to think of how do you kind of create that cross-functional change management team, which can help through this end-to-end transformation journey that you're going to do. And as you're kind of designing this, one of the principles we have seen is how can we do more and more with less is going to be interesting to kind of drive this, right? So, hey, how do you kind of drive lesser operational inefficiencies, right? Duplications of systems, data silos, how do you kind of remove that? And how do you then do more out of that because you're able to drive better insights, better experience, better time to market? So I think those are going to be things that we do believe are going to defining the industry leaders versus the rest of them, right? So I think that's something which I would leave the group with this.
I guess with that, yeah, I mean, I definitely want to thank each of you for taking time out to share your thoughts and knowledge on the topic. It's clearly something that you know is very relevant. So thank you, everybody else that's joined in. You know, thank you for spending time with us here and contributing to the answers to those questions and everything. And Alan, I guess with that, I'll leave the last minute to you to close it out.
Again, thanks to all of you for joining us today. Our goal, of course, is not simply to present interesting and provocative conversation, but to make information actionable to you. We'll follow up with in our next email to you, inviting you to make contact in a complimentary fashion, just to talk about issues that are pressing, opportunities where any of these experts can be helpful to you, and in particular, help you think through and how to evaluate what are the right next steps for your organization. And as I said at the top of this, please look forward to a replay opportunity for your colleagues to listen to this as well. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next session we have together. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.